I love color, and it all started way back when I was coloring in coloring books. I remember being around 6 years old, and I was coloring in my coloring book, and I was obsessed trying to decide if blue-green should be my favorite color or if green-blue should be my favorite color. And it was intense even back then, and ever since I've just been drawn to color. The first time I tried markers was a disaster. I was doing my first architecture project, and I wanted a quick way to colorize it, not knowing anything about markers. This is what I had in mind. But the result was something more like this. So if you feel like your markers are being difficult, I have 3 tips to help you outsmart those bad boys. Tip number 1. Markers come with these color samples on the caps, but they're not accurate at all, so just ignore them. Don't even bother looking at them. When you're buying a marker at the store, you can test it there and then test it again on the material or the fabric or the paper that you're going to use, and then that way if you need to make any adjustments, you can do so without messing up your artwork. Tip number 2. Markers either bleed or they streak. That's just the way they are. And you can see here, this is a bleeding marker. And by saying bleeding, what I'm really saying is it continues to spread out on the paper after I stop using it. For example, here you can see it's kind of growing. And you can see on the right-hand side, you can see how the edge is bleeding into the first line that I drew. That's a bleeding marker. These markers are streaky. You can see that, well, you can see the lines, how they were drawn. And they're not as smooth and well blended as the bleeding markers were. Tip number 3. When you know how your markers are going to behave, you can plan ahead, and that's going to save you a lot of heartbreak and frustration. For example, you'd want to use bleeding markers here for that nice smooth finish. You just have to stay away from the lines. A while back, I made a marker swatch book for all my markers. And then as I buy new markers, I make swatches for them. And so it was a hassle to make it first, but it's really been helpful to know what I'm dealing with on my markers. I know which ones are bleeders and I know which ones are streakers. And I have that base of information, but I also need to check and see how the markers will perform on a sketchbook where I have some artwork that I want to colorize. So let's get into that. This is going to be a test. It'll be fun. Now we can get to work. You can see in the middle is the subject. These are the Japanese peanut crackers that I'm trying to practice the marker with. And you can see the swatches that I selected from my notebook on the sides and where I'm planning on using the different colors on the different crackers. Wow, this green marker really bleeds a lot. I'm going to have to stay far inside the pencil lines if I don't want that much bleed. The other markers don't seem quite as dramatic, but then maybe I'm just adjusting for it. This brown is a little bit grainy, which is fine. So is that brown. It's a little grainy on this paper, which is kind of a nice texture for the crackers, actually. And then using the fine point, I can do some nice crackly edges. And it's not bleeding, so that's nice. Oh, the gray's bleeding quite a bit. But that gray isn't bleeding as much. The pencil feels good on the paper. It has a lot of tooth, so it has a nice grab when I use the pencil. I like it. I think the marker is going to be really good for this paper. That's a nice surprise. I hope you found some useful information in there. You can leave a comment below. And if you haven't subscribed, I hope you will consider that. And if you have subscribed, thank you. I adore you. That's it for now. We're just getting started. So take care, and I'll see you in the next one.